Well, thank you guys for watching. Today we have Commissioner John Mueller with us. First time ever that the Yonkers Police Department has a cyber town hall. Things have changed, Commissioner.
Things have changed, and in a lot of ways for the better.
And we have to adapt to the changes.
Sure do.
Commissioner, has been how long since you were appointed and confirmed?
I was appointed in July, confirmed in September, and we've been rolling along ever since.
Now, every time a new leadership CEO comes into any organization, they do changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they lead the department the way they think the department or the organization should be led. What are you doing?
Well, as far as a management philosophy and how we manage our people, and the truth is that the police department, like a lot of other organizations, it's all about people. It's about the people we serve. It's about the people that work within the Yonkers Police Department. So I have a philosophy of the servant leader, and I ask all of my people to be servant leaders. What you're looking for with the servant leader is someone who makes themselves as valuable as they can for their people. You know, the idea is at the end of the day, the servant leader creates an environment for his employees and his personnel that when, at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, their people will go out and do everything that supervisor needs them to do because they've been treated properly. They've been valued, they've been respected, they've been heard, they've been consulted with. Ultimately, they've been held accountable as well. But at the end of the day, I think that puts our officers into this kind of situational readiness where they can go out and serve the public and treat the public as best they can.
Now, Commissioner, there is two types of commissioner, at least in my opinion. There are commissioners that come from the civilian side, and there are commissioners that been on the force all their lives. So they know everything from the ground up to the chain of command to the leadership, which is your case. I have heard you talking, and you are all about communication.
Yes.
You spoke about how important it is to have an open channel of communication between policing or police department and the community that you serve. Am I wrong on that understanding?
No, you're absolutely correct. I think we all do better when we understand each other, or at least we attempt to give each other's perspective. I think, you know, we need to stop being afraid of each other. We need to stop not wanting to engage ourselves on topics that might be considered controversial and just get it all out. I think at the end of the day, we should be governed and guided by this one guiding light that says that we're all the same. Fairly, we're pretty much all the same, and we all want the same things. You know, what does the public want? They want to be treated with respect by the police. They want to trust their police department. They want to feel safe. They want to feel secure. They want a very good quality of life, and you can bundle all those things together and provide kind of a platform of how we can do all these things and still meet our other objectives too.
Now, Commissioner, I have been in a few events where I heard you speaking. And I'm going to make, if you allow me to, I'm going to make your words my words.
Okay.
Okay? And what you said to your recruits, people that are coming to the force, to the police officers is treat others as you like to be treated.
Yes. I would even take it one step further. What we're really looking to do is to have the police officers never forget, and it's a great opportunity situationally to get the new recruits because they're coming in and they have an idealistic view, but what we never want them to lose, we want them to gain experience, we want to get, you know, better their craft and improve every day. But the one thing I do not want to change is how they feel when they start their career as police officers before they hit the street. And so the philosophy, as you said, is very simply, how would you want your mother treated? Well, treat someone your mother's age how you would want your mom treated. How would you want your son treated? Well, treat someone your son's age the way you would want to be treated. And I think they come in a very nice position when they come into the police department where that resonates with them. And it's important for me to pass that on, because when we treat everyone like family and we treat people the way we want our own families and loved ones and friends to be treated, you almost can never get it wrong.
Now, Commissioner, that's a beautiful philosophy, and that's a beautiful ideology. But do your officers really follow that line? Do they really understand that the respect that you talk about, it's a two-way street? Yes, we should respect law enforcement. Yes, we should obey the laws, but the police officers also have an obligation to respect the people that they serve.
And we do.
You know? Some don't. Okay? And I'm going to give you an example. I don't want to dwell too much into it. And the example that I'm going to give you is not a personal example. I'm just going to use myself as an example to illustrate the issue. Very often when police officers are at the scene, we understand that they focused on what's going on there. They don't need no distractions. They don't need people to be asking questions, because that's not the time to ask questions. They focus on the situation. I, as a reporter, cover many scenes. You know, we cover many scenes. And I am at the scene where there is an incident going on. Police officer arrives. I'm parked maybe in the wrong place. It's a loading zone. But there is a crime going on. Officer just arrives at the scene. Should he focus on the scene, on the crime, or should he focus on the car that is parked on a non-loading zone for 5 minutes? Because as soon as they walk in, where is Ben's car?
Okay.
Forget about the scene. That becomes secondary. Things that, according to the police department, no distraction should be in place because they focused on the crime scene. Now, we can take Ben out of that situation and put other examples.
So it all comes down to communication, and I appreciate the fact, respectfully, that we're not going to try this particular incident here on this interview.
Definitely.
But what we are going to do is we're going to talk about communication. So are we better off when we're explaining things to people? Are we better off when we're telling people as to why? Different officers in a scene like you're describing, without going into the specific crime, we have to understand that different officers are responsible for different things. Some officers may be responsible for crowd control. Some officers may be responsible for vehicular traffic flow while they're investigating the case. So there's a lot of different things. I think we always do better at the end of the day when we explain things to people. Now, you may not be happy that they told you move the car out of a loading zone, but I think, and that's one thing we're always working towards. We're always working to encourage our police officers to, if they have time, to take the 30 seconds to say to you, we can't have the car here because, and there may be another reason. It's always better to explain rather than just say move the car. Now, again, it's hard to go into the details of this particular situation because I don't know what the situation was. I don't know if track was backed up. I don't know if there was other trucks waiting to go into the loading zone and then they double parked and they started backing traffic up. Don't know the situation. Communication is always better, but also it's important for the public to understand that a crime scene is not necessarily every officer is there focusing on that particular crime. Some are tasked with just protecting the crime scene. Others are tasked, like I said, pedestrian flow, vehicular flow, and other things that are happening, kind of ancillary things that are happening outside of the actual crime scene. So we always do better when we explain ourselves.
Right. In that case, I actually, before I got the ticket, I said, officer, would you like me to move the car? He wasn't interested in that. He was interested in giving me the ticket. Mm-hmm. Now, Commissioner...
But I will say, and I think we can both agree, that the best way to handle this is to park legally around the corner and then walk and then they have no case. No one has a case. So at the end of the day, if there is a loading zone and you're parked illegally, they have a right to give summons. I'm not saying I'm not going to play, the advocate or say protect, I'm not going to be a prosecutor or a defense attorney. What I'm going to say is that it's always an easier argument to make if you're parked legally and you followed all of the rules.
Correct.
Now, sometimes that means walking an extra block. And I know that as a reporter, I can really understand how that must be frustrating because then you have to take all of your equipment there and everything else. And look, you're an aggressive reporter. You like to get out there. You like to get on the scene. But, it may be a little more helpful if you just didn't park illegally, no matter what. And don't give that opportunity to say it's a discretionary thing. Do I write a summons or do I not? We can both agree that if you parked around the corner legally, it wouldn't be an issue.
Commissioner, we have more important things to go.
Yes, sir.
Let's just move on.
Okay.
Yonkers and the people of Yonkers. Mm-hmm. How you feel is the relationship between police department and the people of Yonkers? I know that every year we have a survey. I see the results. Mostly, I would say 90% more. Okay, very happy with the way the Yonkers Police Department engages with the community. And many even think that we are a police department, your police department, is an example to the nation. Other police departments should learn how Yonkers PD engages with the community.
Okay.
But East Yonkers and West Yonkers is like two different things. The positiveness that you get from East Yonkers is not the same as you get from West Yonkers. Maybe the people from West Yonkers don't file surveys, but the opinion that they have is different from the people from the other side. You go to the projects, you talk to minorities, they see things different. You have any idea of why that is?
Well, I think there is, we all have, perspectives on things, and my question would be, are we talking about, listen, nationally, policing has come a long way. We can always do better, but obviously there have been a lot of painful points in the history of United States policing that we're not proud of, and particularly in how we police communities of color. And that you don't solve that problem overnight. You don't solve it overnight. You don't change people's perceptions overnight. But what you can do is you can try to focus and really work hard on building relationships on a daily basis. It doesn't, listen, at the end of the day, I always use Ferguson as an example. So Ferguson, there were, I think everyone's familiar with that situation where there were riots and everything else. And really the discourse came, in my opinion, again, not from that incident, but from a whole host of issues that created almost like a powder keg. If you look into the Ferguson example, there was tons of ticketing, there was bail, bail bondsmen, there was fines and cars being towed and houses, people being evicted. The government essentially seemed to be relying all on opportunities to sanction people to pay their revenue, right, through ticketing and arrests and things like that. You can't operate like that and not expect when then something really tragic happens, as it did there, that this powder keg isn't going to explode. So how do you fix that? You fix that by creating an environment. Again, it doesn't happen overnight, but you take on small jobs. The truth is, you referred earlier to east side and west side of Yonkers. I don't know if I necessarily agree. I think that they're not that different. I think that everybody, whether you live on Wilburton Avenue or you live in Sarah Lawrence Park West, you want the same things. You want there to be no litter. You want everyone to turn their radios down at a reasonable hour at night. You don't want to have people park and block you to get out from your driveway. You want the police to respect you, and you want to feel safe walking from your car to your home and in your home.
Now, Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt. The wants are the same, but what about the gets? Are the same?
Well, that's where I'm getting at. The gets come from building relationships. The gets come from saying, like, listen, we're fortunate that we don't have a tremendous, our crime is at historic lows. So we have an opportunity now to build these bridges that, in the past, we might say, well, the two street lights out are out on Wilburton. All right, it's really not our problem. It's a DPW problem. It's a lighting department problem. It is our problem because I see this as an opportunity for us to make that connection and go back. So the community meeting comes. You know how I feel about the Hudson River Community Association. I love all community associations, but they're near and dear to me because I did a lot of my what has developed me as far as professional development has come from HARCA and interacting with the folks on HARCA who I adore. I do. I don't play favorites, but I do. There's a special place in my heart for the people in HARCA. That's the Wilburton Avenue area, Glenwood, and all those areas. We developed a great relationship, not because we agreed with each other or because I made promises or they, saddled me with impossible asks. We started with very simple things. So the street light example. We could have been like every other, in the past, like every other police captain and said, well, you have to call 377 help for that. We recognized that there was value in us going out after the meeting, identifying that particular street light that was out, calling on our own, and getting that street light fixed. That's where you're starting to build a relationship because, again, robberies are horrible, but there's just not that many of them. There are far more ways to connect with a community that needs us to reach out to them and try to want to make a connect and try to want to build relationships, positive relationships by fixing street lights, cleaning up dumping, addressing loud music and things like that. There are tons of opportunities to really make a good relationship that have nothing to do with crime, but they meet in all the same things. Now, when you circle back to the Ferguson example, what do you end up getting? You might have a community that's completely upset and shattered, just like Ferguson was, but because you have developed this working relationship in advance, and you've done it for years and years of working towards simple goals, people might be more listening, more be willing to interact and talk about it.
So Commissioner, what I'm taking from what you just said is that you need to lay down the foundation in order to have a successful relationship between police
Absolutely.
and community.
That's right. And you need to know, and I hold all of my commanding officers of precincts accountable for this, you need to say when you're asked for something at a meeting from a resident, and it's something you can do, because remember, we can't do everything that we're asked. Some of the asks are too much and it's not realistic. We need to be honest and truthful about that. We need to be able to explain why we can't, but when we can, we should be prepared to come back the next meeting and say, we accomplished that. We solved that problem. I remember when those 2 lights were out. They were out last month. So-and-so asked that they be repaired. Are they repaired? And the answer is yes. That's how you start building this relationship.
So those little things really are the most important things.
They grow exponentially, because what the community realizes is, like, yeah, we can work with these guys and girls, and we can actually solve some problems, and solve problems, and sustainably solve them. It's good to just solve a problem for a week. You don't want to put a Band-Aid on things. You want to solve problems with permanence and as long as you can.
Now, Commissioner, I know you for a few years now, since I think you were the captain of the
4th Precinct.
4th Precinct. I was there in a meeting or two. We were talking back then about the stop and shake.
Mm-hmm.
You were the man in front leading it with Hector.
Yes.
How is that going?
It continues to go to this day. And that again goes back to the sustainable piece. This isn't something that was a flash in the pan. Hector, to his credit, has maintained an interest in it. Our community affairs has embraced it. It's important to get feedback from all sides. It doesn't help if the community says, well, this was worthless, or the cops say, well, no one even came and talked to us, or we didn't want to talk to them. But I'm hearing really good feedback from these opportunities where people can get to know each other. And again, the communication piece, the familiarity piece, all that stuff goes towards having a better police-community relationship.
Can we measure those things? Is it something that you can actually measure and say, look, this has created a positive impact. We have changed mindsets, or get a brighter future?
I think. Well, I have a philosophy that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So you need to do that. I don't know if specifically you can measure that, because remember, there's no silver bullet to solve, police-community relations. Stop and shake is a component of that. The Yonkers Force football team is another component of that. The YPI, the Yonkers Police Initiative, is another component. We have so many of them. The community meetings, the solving the little problems. When you're doing all these things collectively, that's how you solve it. So can you measure it? It's hard to do. Surveys are good for that, right? It's good when I hear really good stories, and it's also good when I hear not so good stories, because both of them give me an opportunity to address and fix. The one thing we will say, though, is that we're never satisfied.
But that's a good thing.
We never want to rest on our laurels and say, we've solved the problem, we have a great community relationship, we love everybody loves us. No. You continue to work, because this is you want to be agile, you want to be dynamic, you want to be able to change with the times and address areas where we might have shortcomings that we can fill in. So it takes, and our cops are the best for this, creativity, critical thinking out of the box. All these things contribute to having a real robust way to reach out to the community.
Well, Commissioner, I don't know if you will agree or disagree with me, but I've been living in Yonkers for a long time.
How long?
40 years.
Okay.
Okay, 40 years. I knew Commissioner Fernandez many years ago. I don't know, were you in the police force back then?
He was before my time. My first police commissioner was, he was from Texas. And then after that, it was, I believe, Commissioner Casino. So it started. I came on the YPD in 1994.
Okay. So I look at the police department of the past, and I look at the police department of the present, and I see two totally different police departments. Back then, there was no coffee with a cop. There was no stop and shake, and the mentality was totally different.
I would agree.
Okay, it was totally different.
And when you say totally different, you mean not in a healthy way?
Not in a healthy way at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not in, today we see younger generations, different mindsets, probably young police officers that went to school with many of the people they serve.
Mm-hmm.
Stop and shake is good. They know you get to know people you serve on a personal basis, but those officers already know those people on a personal basis. So it's a different police department.
And it makes you better. It makes you better with community outreach, what you're referring to, because when you know someone, you're just naturally going to work harder for them. I don't care what the occupation is. I don't care what the job is or any skill sets there are. You're always going to work harder when you know people. So the first pillar of all this, the foundation of this, is to get to know people. And then you start working with them to solve problems. The problem might not be completely solved by the police department. The community may have a major component of solving the problem. And those are always better. I love those opportunities because when you do that together and collectively, you just kind of, you win and lose together. And that's a healthy thing.
Commissioner, if a crime happens in East Yonkers versus a crime that happens in West Yonkers, you will get more help from the people in East Yonkers than you happen to get on the people in West Yonkers. I'm not talking about everyone, I'm talking in general terms. I have been in crime scenes where the person who was shot inside of an apartment. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he knows who actually shot him.
I would agree.
You know?
In most cases.
In most cases, of course, less. If the bullet came through the window, you don't know, but it happened inside, so he knows. He comes out, I know nothing, I saw nothing. If it happens on East Yonkers, it's most likely that somebody will step forward and help the police solve that crime, give information that will get a resolution to that crime. Why two different areas, see things totally different?
I don't know if it's totally different, and I don't know if it's not so to me. Again, we just maybe disagree. I don't see it as so black and white. I don't see it as one on the east side and one way on the west side. It comes down to the people, and every situation is dynamic, and every situation is different. It's true that there are some people that feel more comfortable speaking with the police, but that goes back to our earlier discussion about how do we build these relationships, because one of the reasons why we have changed from what you referred to under Commissioner Fernandez to now a totally different police department is we're realizing that not only is the police-community relationship important in just relationships, it's important in crime solving. That people trust us more, people are more willing to talk to us, people are more willing to interact with us where we can solve some problems and we can solve cases. So that's another benefit of this police-community relationship, that the more we interact with people and communicate and share shared values, the better we're going to be, and the more likely we're going to have someone who is a victim or a witness who's willing to come forward based on the relationship.
On that note, we're going to transition to something that is very hot in our society today, mm-hmm. in New York, mm-hmm. bail reform,
Aha.
discovery.
Yes.
I don't think you're going to have much help from the community with the new bail reform and discovery. Mm-hmm. If I have to call the police department about a crime that just happened in my house, mm-hmm. I would think twice, because nowadays the perpetrator will have an opportunity to come to my house with my attorney and face me face to face and invade my privacy. I see it as a problem. I understand low income, high income, trying to balance things out, but at the end of the day, the average guy on the street is the one that's going to pay for this.
That's correct, and my feeling is, and I have very strong opinions about this, is I think that communities of color are going to be impacted the most in a negative way. But you have to differentiate between discovery and bail reform. So which one do you want to start with? So
we can start with the bail reform and then move up towards the consequences of bail reform.
Okay. So we're working now with our state legislators with bail reform as it was passed. I feel like our legislators are willing to listen. They're willing to share ideas and willing to hear positions. We've been actively, discussing things with them and pointing things out that are just really problematic and have it just puts a real toll on public safety. So for me, I kind of look like, listen, was bail reform needed? Absolutely it was. I don't think you'll find most police executive professionals or police in general that feel like it wasn't necessary. I think that it was too far-reaching. I believe that the legislative branch overreached into judicial discretion. And I think that if we can make an articulate case for common sense bail reform that everybody can wrap their hands around, everyone can understand that it's not just about the offender. We're thinking in terms of a victim-centric approach. So for me, I have 3 talking points for bail reform I'll give you off the top of my head. The first one is bail was never intended to keep people in jail. And I think that's where a lot of the bail reform advocates started this process of wanting to change it. But what we must agree on is that bail was used to ensure someone coming to court. So one of the biggest issues we have now is that someone who, let's say they've been arrested 30 times, and that gets back to, we haven't talked about my policing philosophy, but I have a precision policing philosophy.
We're going to get to that.
But it's interrelated, so I'll just give you a very brief piece of this. Precision policing recognizes, and I'm a huge believer in it, it kind of marries up the old CompStat with community policing, because we're not stopping everybody based on patterns. We're stopping people. The truth is, if you believe in recidivism, and I do, take larceny from auto, people breaking into cars where they try the handle or they break the window. If there's 30 of these in a given precinct, it's not, 30 people doing one each. One guy's doing 20 and another guy's doing 10. And those are the 2 people that are responsible for all of them. It's just the way it is. So when we focus on those folks, we're not stopping people unnecessarily. We're not making people feel like it's a police state. We're stopping everybody out there based on a description. We know who the bad guys are. Where that kind of creates a lot of problems for us to keep everyone safe is that we now can no longer keep that person in jail. So I can give you examples. So what I would like to see with bail reform, I would love for the legislators, the senators, the assembly people to hear kind of from a public safety standpoint is 3 things. Number 1, failure to appear counts. So most of our recidivist offenders are prolific offenders, whether it's misdemeanors or felonies. This small percentage of people, probably less than 5%, commit probably 85% of the crime. So if you focus on them, and you focus on them not just in arrest, but throughout the process, you're going to keep crime down, people safe, and no one has to be stopped, questioned, and frisked. They just don't. So
which we don't see much in Yonkers.
We don't see much in Yonkers.
Due to your precisely policing.
Yeah, precision policing. So with failure to appear counts, right now, bail reform, as it stands, a person might not show up to court 17 times, and the judge is not given the latitude to consider those 17 failed appearances. Now, to me, it's just simply common sense. If a person doesn't show up 17 times out of the 30 times they've been arrested, I think we can both agree they probably have a propensity not to show up again. That's what bail was really meant for. And we've lost that tool because now you can only look at the crime the person is before the judge for, whether they didn't show up for that court case. To me, it's a criminal history, and they call it a history for a reason. This particular defendant has a history of not showing up to court. We need the tools to make sure that this person stays in jail because he's proven he's not going to come. The last thing any police department wants is mass incarceration. I know I don't want it, and I can tell you it didn't work. But what I can tell you is, with some of the reforms now, it's going to be harder and harder to maintain, security and safety within certain communities because people get arrested and they come out and they reoffend. And we're seeing it now constantly. We have examples, I'm not going to mention names or situations, but we have one individual who was probably identified. He committed 6 crimes in 4 days, and he was released every single time. And he told the officers, it's my understanding, could be anecdotal, I don't know, I didn't speak to the officers personally, but he goes, I'm not going to stop. Now, is this driven by drug addiction? It may be. Is this driven by mental illness? It may be. But at the end of the day, we're not making our community safer by allowing this person to commit the crime, be arrested, and then reoffend, commit the crime, be rearrested, released again and again and again. So we would like to focus on this very small subset of offender where they're prolific offenders, they offend over and over again. We need to have the ability, and again, it's not the executive branch that's asking, the police is the executive branch. All we're asking is for the legislators to consider to give the judges the right for the prosecutor to make a case as to why this person or that person doesn't belong walking around or we need to set bail. I think it would have worked when The person was attacking Jewish people, anti-Semitic attacks where she punched 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people, got released, did it again. DWIs where people have been arrested for DWI, released, got out, ran people over and killed them. We just had an example in Nassau County where somebody did 4 or 5 burglaries, released, and each time they go back and they do more burglaries. Like, these are cases, and there's not many of them, where we want the opportunity for the prosecutor to make a case to the judge to say, here's the history, where we need this person, we're asking for bail. Not everybody. The truth is, Yonkers has really come down in arrests anyway. We probably at the highest point, probably, in 2006 or 7, we probably made 6,000 or 7,000 arrests. Now, I don't have those numbers accurate. I can't give you to the number, but I can say probably around that number. Now we're around 3,000, so we've almost halved our arrests. And the truth is, it's not that I don't care about most of the arrests, but I understand with this with our precision policing model that the value is I'm really worried about less than 70 people probably in the entire city of Yonkers as far as committing crime. If you give me the tools to address those 70 people, people are safer, people still aren't incarcerated on a mass number and things like that, and it seems to be a good balancing. So we're engaging our legislators, we're talking to them, they're willing to listen, and the truth is that we have relationships with all of them. I have a great relationship with Senator Cousins. I have a great relationship with Senator Mueller. I have a great relationship with Assemblyman Sage. So what's good about this is that we may have different opinions and we may approach situations from different angles. But at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing. We want our people to be safe.
Well, Commissioner, if you're going to play a game, you should know the rules of the game prior to the game. Mm-hmm. This conversation that you are having with the legislators, shouldn't that conversation should have taken place prior to passing the law?
I wish it had, and I wish, and I can't speak for each legislator as to whether they engaged local law enforcement. I know I wasn't engaged. I would have said the same things I'm saying to you today. I would have said them when they're developing the law. But respectfully, these are our elected leaders. These are the people that we are elected to make these decisions. I think it's always more important, and that's kind of like the community policing model. We want all of our community to the table to understand different approaches, different perceptions, different angles of how they feel about different things, so we can better serve them. I think this is a similar model that if we had brought in, and listen, it's not just police or judges. I don't know if judges can weigh in. It's also victims advocates. I'm sure that victim advocates with bail reform as it stands now may have a lot to say about the impact of victims. And their goal in the not-for-profit world to make sure their victims are safe and secure and feeling safe. And that kind of goes into discovery.
Well, I was reading about all the crimes that today requires no cash bail. Mm-hmm. More than I imagined.
Yes.
Even murder.
Yes.
In certain cases.
In certain cases, yes.
In certain cases. We had a press conference not long ago where Senator Mueller was, the cash for guns. Mm-hmm. Nice law, good law, asking for us to return guns, people, but at the same time, if those people who use those guns to commit a crime would be released the next day with no cash bail. So you're doing one thing in one hand, but you're doing it completely different on the other hand.
And that's where the judges come in. Again, I'm not making the case for the police. I'm making the case to allow, look, this is the greatest model in the history of the world, our United States, our democratic process in the United States. Flawed, bumps in the road, difficult, different aspects and different opinions, but at the end of the day, it's the best model this world has ever seen. And that's my belief. But at the end of the day, that's why you bring in everybody to the table when you have these considerations. If you focus on bail reform with an idea on the offender, does the person have a criminal history a mile long? Does the person show up to court? Was this a particularly violent thing where the person might go back and reoffend? All we're asking is to give the judges the decision to make. They still may say no bail, but all we want is the opportunity for them. We want to make a strong case to say, person's been arrested 30 times. In the last 7 days, the person was arrested 4 times. We need you to keep this person in jail until we solve this problem or until they're sentenced or whatever it is. I don't think that's a stretch. And again, I don't think that the overwhelming majority of people that are arrested fall into that category. But that small category is really the, if you ever saw the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, those are the Glengarry leads. That's what I refer to.
Okay.
They're this many, and what you want to do is you want to focus on them. You focus on them. You're not disrupting other people. You're not stopping some guy who's coming home from his job with the Metro North at 11 o'clock at night because he happens to be a black man in an area that there were larceny from autos. We don't need to stop that person with the precision policing model, but we do need the tools for the guy who is breaking into the cars to deal with him, and then everyone else can be left alone. They're feeling secure from the police. They're not getting their cars broken into, and we're focusing on the right people. To me, it's a win-win.
So, but the discretion from the judge to release or not to release with the new law has been removed.
It's been removed. It was, like I said, just personally, opinion, I think it was an overreach from one branch of government, the legislature, to another branch of government, which is judicial. And I think that it was a bit of an overreach. I understand the motivation, and I know the examples that people have given. They give the example of Harvey Weinstein. Well, he's walking around, on millions of dollar bail. I don't think you'll find one police officer that doesn't say, no, he should be in jail too. But I don't think two wrongs make a right. And I think, when you're talking about Khalif Browder, that case, where you have someone who was locked up in jail for 3 years and ultimately committed suicide. There's nobody on the police side doesn't have pain for the parents of the child that went through that. I have 3 sons myself. No one argues that should not have been addressed in a major way, and that we can never allow that to happen on a very minor charge. What we're focusing on here is, with the precision policing model, is making a legitimate case based on facts and evidence that a person gets arrested and rearrested and rearrested and rearrested, that we have to deal with them differently than we do with a kid who has one arrest and things like that.
I understand, Commissioner. Commissioner, now let's move into something that affects Yonkers, your city, directly.
Mm-hmm.
The homeless in
Yes.
Yonkers. I understand that homeless on itself, it's not a police matter. You don't get involved in homeless social programs to help the homeless. But with the homeless come other issues. Crime in the area, impacting local businesses, children. Because you walk in Gary Square at 2 or 3 o'clock, might be a stabbing there might be the guy high on K2 down the street, and I don't want to expose that to my child. There is a whole bunch of things that spread out from the homeless situation.
Yes.
And now we have New York City sending their homeless to Yonkers. It's a problem.
It's irresponsible on New York City's part.
But the irresponsibility from New York City, it's affecting your city.
It is.
Okay.
Our city.
Our city, exactly. What can be done? What do you do? How you address those issues?
So it goes back to the precision policing model. Most people that are homeless, whether people know this or not, it's really a housing issue. They have jobs, but they don't have enough money because housing stock in the Northeast in particular, and the West, out west in San Francisco and Los Angeles, if you really look, that's one of the root causes. There's not enough affordable housing. And so people can't find a way to pay their bills based on the jobs that they have to meet all their needs, food and clothing and shelter, all those basic needs. So housing is an issue. And we have a philosophy in Yonkers about the homeless issue. And again, most of the homeless and you can almost draw a parallel with this recidivist criminal, this precision policing model I talk about all the time, is that the overwhelming majority of homeless don't cause any trouble. They don't aggressively panhandle, they don't publicly urinate, they don't, they just don't. They go about their business. So we're talking about a small group. We are not anti-homeless in Yonkers. We are empathetic police department. We have an empathetic mayor and an empathetic city. What we are not for is bad behavior. So at the end of the day, if someone is going to make people walking home from the train, especially women, uncomfortable because of aggressive panhandling, we're going to deal with that person. The same thing goes for public urination, exposure of the person. There are things that it's okay to be homeless, it's not okay to make a woman with a baby carriage, uncomfortable because you're pulling your pants down. Now, some of it can be related to mental illness, but this comes back to having the other segments of government give us the tools or provide services and resources where that person his needs are met or her needs are met but also our needs are met where, and you did it correctly, you talked not just about the homeless person and their plight, you talked about the person who's paying rent, who's trying to make a living with the store, or a kid waiting for the bus. Like, they do not, no one has a right to make someone else feel uncomfortable unnecessarily. We find ourselves in the middle, but it does come down to that. So again, my suggestion is that this is a countywide issue. Westchester County, in terms of government, is tasked with handling the homeless problem. I would love to see, an overlay, several overlay maps of not just where shelters are in terms of the 5 cities. Because remember, we have New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, we have Peekskill, Yonkers, White Plains, name them all. Okay. Interestingly, they're to the north, the south, the east, and the west, and White Plains in the middle. Are we looking at this on a global perspective, a countywide perspective? And you can't just go by shelters, because to your point earlier, you have to go by services that fuel homelessness. A lot of people are homeless because they're addicted to drugs. Well, where does that come from? Then you have a methadone clinic. How many methadone clinics are in the county? Are they equally proportioned, or is Yonkers taking 200 people a day for methadone, and other cities aren't taking any? Well, that's going to drive our homeless population, and that small percentage that we're always trying to deal with on a regular basis. So I'd like to see the county look at this in an entire perspective of all 5 cities. I understand, Hastings may not be able to take a giant homeless shelter because of their size and resources, but the truth is that right now, my police department, my city, is, in my opinion, and again, people can refute it, and we can have that conversation, a healthy conversation. We can, as some people say, we can disagree without being disagreeable. I'm not so sure that it's proportional throughout the county, and and I'm certain it should be proportional around the county. And I think that if you were able, think of the Bill de Blasio's plan where he wants to close Rikers Island. One of the major reasons he wants to close Rikers Island, because he feels as though prisoners who are arrested will less likely to reoffend if they're closer to their families. So now you have a smaller prison in each of the 5 boroughs instead of just Rikers Island. Well, why can't we take the same outlook and philosophy with homelessness, saying maybe a homeless person is from New Rochelle, but they happen to be in Yonkers, but they're closer to family. Now, maybe they're not allowed in that family's house, but just being closer to that family might be really helpful for themselves. Than just dropping them off in Yonkers. So, I want to look at this. I would propose looking at this from a public safety issue, collectively with all the cities and all the mayors and the county, and saying, like, let's find a very robust way to handle the issue where smaller is better. So we don't have large concentrations. I think even for the individual homeless person, I think it might be healthier for them and safer for them, and they may have a better chance of leaving homelessness if there were smaller, more concentrated, and more saturated with services in different areas than just one area.
Well, Commissioner, the way I see it, I think the homeless issue, I think you agree with me, it's more of an economic issue.
Oh, there's no question. Well, partially, but then there's also the drug issue.
Exactly. But it's mostly an economic issue.
And a mental illness issue.
I was going to get there. Most of the crimes that we see are not done by those that are affected by homeless due to economic issue, but probably due to mental illness.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt, right? So if that is the reason, so what is your city, our city, doing to address mental illness issue? Because those people with mental illness should not be walking among us.
Well, it's a good point, and so the Yonkers Police Department came up with a great model several years ago where we have 2 officers that are trained as homeless outreach. They work with Lamont Brown, who has a master's
from the powerhouse, right?
Yes, master's social work in homelessness and mental illness. He is fantastic, and we offer, to your point, we have a record of offering services. We offer housing, we offer job training, drug rehabilitation, all kinds of different services that will help get you out of the homeless cycle. Some people just don't want it. And some people, to your point, are so mentally ill, when you say, that guy doesn't really know how to come in out of the rain. No, he really doesn't. He doesn't know enough to come in out of the rain. The mental illness is that deep. So those folks, we need a more robust plan. There is Kendra's law where, and there's public health laws where I think, it's uncomfortable, but saying would we rather have this person roam free with all this mental illness and then freeze to death, or we'd rather maybe go before a judge and say we're going to make a case to say this person should be institutionalized in some form just to keep themselves safe and other people safe. So I don't know what the balance is. I think that's way above my pay grade. But on the ground, I see what we're doing, how we're handling the homeless, and how their officers are doing a great job, the best they can. But to your point, I don't think some of the people have such mental illness, and it's manifested itself in such a way that they're continuing to reoffend in those very, very what people would consider minor crimes or petty offenses. I don't think that any offenses are petty. I think when it's directed at you, it's not petty. And as police department, we have to always think about the victim and the person on the other end of that. But I think I would love to see a more robust program in terms of dealing with mental illness, dealing with drug addiction, and then, like I said, the housing stock issue. If you have more affordable housing in different areas, I think we would be in a better position.
Commissioner, with the way the construction is going and the way our city is increasing, I don't see a much brighter future. Rents are not getting cheaper.
They are, and that's why, and I think the mayor has said this over and over again, if all the cities in the county and the counties work together to not just say Yonkers has to provide all affordable housing, everyone can do it. We all raise the water level when we work together. And if everybody's willing to take some of this challenge, I think we're better, and I think we can do it. I'm an optimist.
So am I. Now, Commissioner, let's move into something else. Your precedent, the prior commissioner, he gave a directive to the police officers, to the police department. Do we have a sanctuary city or we don't? The directive was police officers that stop somebody or have to arrest somebody, they do not ask for the legal status of that person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Yonkers, we don't have a jail, city jail. So you might not ask for the legal status of that person in the city where the arrest took place, Yonkers. But once he's transported to the county jail, you have no control of it.
That's correct.
Now they might ask for the legal status.
Mm-hmm.
So does one void the directive? Because you're really not doing, well, not you, because that came before you.
Mm-hmm.
But does that really works?
We can only do what we can do. And I would say that I would always reserve the right for the most violent people. If someone wants to sit here and tell me, well, this person, has 3 robbery arrests, and then they just violently assaulted someone and they're undocumented, and we had knowledge of it, I certainly would notify the proper authorities. But what I will say is that I never want, documented or undocumented, anyone to ever feel like they shouldn't call the police because they're not documented, because it's important for the public to know that we don't ask those questions. We never ask those questions. If you are the victim of a crime, if you are involved in a vehicular accident, if you need anything whatsoever, we are here for you without any prejudice. We want it. We're not in the business to do that type of work. We're in the business to help people. So at that moment in time when people need help, we're not asking those questions. We don't want to inhibit our undocumented community from coming if they've been victimized from robberies or assaults or anything like that. We want to always make sure people have a level of comfort with us. Like I said, I may differ from some of the advocates on this matter, where they say, well, we don't even want violent criminals who are documented violent criminal history. You shouldn't be notifying ICE about them either. And I don't agree with that, because at the end of the day, those folks are victimizing their own communities as much as anybody else. And I will use, and the department will use, any and all tools to make sure that our community is safe. The basis is not focused on whether you're undocumented or documented. The basis is focused on we want to keep all of our communities safe.
So, Commissioner, let me say that in Spanish so our Latino friends can understand what you just said.
Please do.
El comisario de la policía está diciendo que si tú eres testigo de un crimen, que no hesites en llamar a la policía. Ellos no te van a reportar a la inmigración o a nada. Que te sientas confortable en llamar, reportar y ayudar a la policía para que el crimen sea resolvido de una manera positiva.
What he said.
Commissioner, just to end the interview, thank you for taking the time. We have to close the interview. We already went over 30 minutes. I have to address only one more thing.
Please do.
Crime in Yonkers by youth offenders.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big problem.
It is.
Okay? It saddens me to see a 12, 13, 14 carrying a gun and pulling a gun on another 10, 12 years old. What is going on?
It's interesting. the offender, it's not, it just seems, I think, sometimes that these offenders are more. I don't know if they're more or less now. There are some schools of thought that feel like, well, if certain groups of guys let the 12-year-old have the gun and handle the gun, that nothing's going to happen to them anyway, so it's safer to give that to them. But at the end of the day, we're going to investigate every crime as vigorously as we can. We're going to work with what we have within the bounds of the law. And we're also going to work very hard in terms of making rehabilitative recommendations for kids like that. You don't want to lose a kid when he's 12 or 13 years old. That's just not what society should do. So we have to put things in place, and we are acting, right now working very proactively to develop our community policing unit. I don't know if you know this, I don't know if the public knows this, but we've bumped up our community policing unit from 4 people to 10. With an eye on doing just this, saying that if we can reach out to people with not-for-profits, because that's a huge benefit for us. We have great relationships with John Thompson from the YMCA and Snug and other places, so we know that while we might not be able to make the case to these 12 and 13-year-olds, we have other community partners that can. And if we work together on this, we might get lucky and save 1 or 2 or as many as we can. At the end of the day, people have to know that police, we're not happy when there's a lot of crime. I would be happy that if I looked on my phone tomorrow morning and looked at the overnight incidences, that there were no violent instances. We have to deal with them, we will deal with them, but there's so many other things we're doing that are positive, that are related to trying to get to the root causes of these things and trying to stop the problem for good. You can put a person in jail for a year or 2 years or 3 years because of a crime they committed. And that should not be off the table, depending, again, on the offender. Is it a recidivist? Is it a prolific? Is it particularly violent? But on the other hand, especially based on age, can we reach these kids? Can we employ all of our resources, not-for-profit, community-based, police, where we can try to figure out a way to get these kids on the right path?
Well, on that note, Commissioner, I thank you for taking the time to speak with us, to speak with all of you. Commissioner Mueller was a man of his word. He said that communication is to him extremely important, to engage with the community. We have that reach. Get involved. Call if you know of a crime. Call if you want to suggest a solution.
And ask questions. Ask questions that if you feel like a police officer, why would you do something? Why would you do a particular thing? I think what you're going to find from the Yonkers Police Department is the overwhelming number of officers are more than happy to engage. And we want to encourage that engagement, because we're going to be better when people understand things.
And you guys, that myth that Yonkers Voice and police don't mix well, it's a myth.
Well, we mix fine. We have our moments,
Exactly.
like everyone does, and so you don't sugarcoat it. But at the end of the day, I respect what you do. I respect the the importance of free press, and I'm all for that. Sometimes we have our moments, sometimes we don't. But at the end of the day, we keep talking, and that's how we're all better.
Commissioner, I have my moments with my wife, and I still love her.
That's correct. Me too.
Till next time. Thank you for watching.
Thank you,
Commissioner, thank
sir.
you.